As the new manager of Newcastle United. The club sacked Ossie Ardiles as manager this morning.
First run out this afternoon for Kevin Keegan, back in Newcastle and facing a struggle to keep the Magpies out of the third division. It was a chance to size up the team, whose fortunes are a far cry from the Newcastle United Keegan once captained into the first division.
This is the only job I've ever wanted. I think we've got tremendous potential here, but potential's only any good if we realise it.
He's been dear to Tyneside hearts since his playing days. A spectacular send-off then, hardly comparable to today's goodbye for Ossie Ardiles, whose turbulent 10 months in charge was dogged by bad results and team injuries.
In shock at the moment, to be perfectly honest. I believe that basically, yes, I needed more time.
This afternoon, a handful of fans caught their first glimpse of Keegan the manager. They know he has just 16 games left to fight off relegation. Jonathan Munro, ITN in Newcastle.
As Newcastle United shuffles the pack yet again. But Ossie's out. He finds that the board's vote of confidence counts for nothing. And for the area. And Opencast miners took the football world to its foundations by enticing one of the nation's sporting heroes out of retirement and back into the game as the club's new manager. Kevin Keegan took control at St James Park this morning, just 3 hours after Ossie Ardiles was given the sack. The former England international, who inspired Newcastle to promotion as a player 8 years ago, has returned for the biggest challenge of his career. We start our special reports with the dramatic announcement by the club's chairman, Sir John Hall.
I'd like to now introduce you to the new manager of Newcastle United. He's well known to you all, and he's well known to the people in the region. And we take great pleasure in introducing him to you now. And I'd like, if you would, come through the doors, please. Kevin Keegan.
This is the moment when Special K walked back into football. It's the job he had to come back for.
I can honestly say that there's no job in football I've ever wanted. This is the only job I've ever wanted. I think we've got tremendous potential here, but potential's only any good if we realise it. I'm hopefully, in the next few weeks, I'm not going to make a lot of statements today that you're going to throw back at me over the current year, 2 years, 3 years, hopefully 20 years. But what I am going to say is we will turn this club around. This club will go back where it belongs.
Fighting words from the new manager of the club lying at the foot of the second division and going nowhere after Saturday's humiliating defeat at Oxford. But now the famous number 7 is ready for a new challenge.
I sat down with my wife yesterday, and I mean, I think she's as shocked as anyone. I've probably learned to live without football. Having played it and seen all the problems, I realised probably the easiest part of football is playing it, because you go home after training and you know, you don't really take too many problems back with you. And so management, which is the total opposite, you've got to take them all home with you, is a different thing. But, you know, the time was right. It's the only job I would have ever even contemplated. If you're asking me, if you tell me you're surprised, then I'm not, it doesn't surprise me, I'm surprised.
Keegan didn't waste any time in getting to know his squad of players. He was well wrapped up for the training session behind closed doors at Benwell this afternoon. Now he's determined to look forward and not back.
Every manager in the country, when they see my appointment here today, will be envious. Because every manager in the country who's worth his salt would want to manage a club like this. You want to be able to put a team out in front of fans like this. Let's look at the positive things. You know, you mustn't look at the negative things in life. I never have. Let's look forward. There's so many pluses about this place. I just hope, along with everybody else, we're all rowing the boat the same way, that we can turn that potential into success.
When Kevin Keegan departed in triumph, no player ever enjoyed a more spectacular send-off. It brought to an end 2 of the most exciting seasons in Newcastle's history. "We're in heaven, we've got Kevin," was the famous quote when manager Arthur Cox and chairman Stan Seymour masterminded their pre-season coup. It stunned the football world, but Tyneside exploded. Special K's debut set the tone. He scored, of course. Keegan was always the grafting superstar. Neither prima donna nor poser, he believed in the work ethic. Sponsors Newcastle Breweries helped bring him to United, and he justified his reputation as a man who delivered the goods on and off the pitch. Even so, it took him 2 seasons to achieve his objective, restoring Newcastle to the first division. but hardly single-handed, he was surrounded by some glorious talent. Keegan's commitment to Newcastle was absolute and unrelenting, but like the true professional he always was, once he decided to retire, there was no sentimental hanging around. He came back in April 1989 for Kenny Wharton's testimonial. The club was on the slide. Keegan's warning, prophetic.
Great players don't come along very often. Been very privileged here. They've had 4 or 5 in the last 5 years, but they've sold them all. You've got a nice stand, but this won't look very good in the 3rd division, will it?
It was at the launch of Newcastle's centenary history in November that Keegan's name was once again linked with the club. He reminded everyone, including the board, of his unrivalled talents as a PR man. But Ardiles was thought to be deeply disturbed at suggestions of Keegan taking an active role at the club, but he can hardly have imagined that day he was listening to his successor.
Ossie Ardiles' home in Jesmond was surrounded this afternoon, but he wasn't under siege. The former World Cup star had invited us into his front room to explain his departure. He was in a state of shock, but refused to criticise the club.
I don't feel any bitterness at all. I love Newcastle, love the place, love everything. Newcastle was beautiful. Everything connected with Newcastle. St. Park, beautiful. Everything was really, really nice. I just wish that Newcastle can go places.
Everyone thought Ardiles would transform the club into one of the best in the country, if not Europe, with his stylish tactics. He took over on April Fool's Day 10 months ago, but he's only won 8 out of 42 games since then. So did he need more time?
Obviously, I am disappointed. I am sad right now. I'm in shock at the moment, to be perfectly honest. I believe that, basically, yes, I needed more time.
Have you been able to talk to the players?
Yes, I went to, because we had training today at 11 o'clock at Durham. So I went to say bye-bye to the boys and obviously thank them for all the help they given me. They always give me 100% support. So I thank them and wish them all the best.
Ossie has always been a tracksuit manager. So what does the future hold for him now?
Where do you go from here? At the moment, I'm going to take a holiday and collect my thoughts and see what I'm going to do next.
A bittersweet day for Sir John Hall. He's pulled off a real scoop, but at the same time hit the classic chairman's own goal. As the results worsened, Sir John has repeatedly insisted he's 1,000% behind Ossie Ardiles. Even after the Oxford humiliation, Sir John's son Douglas repeated that dreaded vote of confidence. Ossie, safe as houses. But Oxford United had seen off Ardiles just as they'd sounded the death knell for Dennis Smith at Sunderland. So what happened to the chairman's belief in his manager?
That didn't change until basically we started to run the figures through the computers and people were asking if we go down to the 3rd, how will it look? And, you know, we're talking about many millions of pounds to save this club. It has to come from a lot of people and we have to get the backing of whole groups and everyone became concerned about going to 3rd division. It's the hardest decision I've ever had to make in my life, in my business life. And I have very, very mixed emotions, but I have to get on with the job and move forward now.
So what next? Keegan will need coaching staff. Glenn Roeder was alongside him in the promotion team. He could also make a return. And as for new players, this gangling youngster made a big impression. Chris Waddle will be a star signing on the pitch.
Manager of United. He's replaced by Kevin Keegan, who captained the club when they were promoted to the 1st Division in 1984. Ardiles said he was disappointed but felt no bitterness towards either Newcastle or Keegan.
For Ossie Ardiles, it's taken just 11 months to discover that big clubs with long traditions have short fuses. With the team going out of the FA Cup to 3rd Division Bournemouth last month in a penalty shootout and near the foot of the 2nd Division, his sacking, following last week's customary poisoned chalice, the vote of confidence, is hardly a surprise. For Ardiles, it's the 2nd time life in English football, which began so sweetly at Spurs, has turned sour. Immediately after guiding Swindon to the 1st Division, the club were demoted because of the financial shenanigans of a previous regime. His disappointment prompted the move to Newcastle, which today he was painfully regretting.
it hurts. It hurt very much. Like I said, right now I am in a state of a little bit of shock, I will say. It will probably hit me very strongly tomorrow and the next week and so on.
Kevin Keegan.
His successor at least starts with the advantage of being a Tyneside folk hero after leading the club to promotion as a player 8 years ago.
They might look back to the time I was here as a player and see it as a success. Even that, although it was a great time, isn't really success for a club this big. I just think that was the start of it.
When Keegan, the player, left Newcastle, he did so in the grand manner. As manager, his first priority is not so much getting the club up to the First Division as preventing a humiliating drop to the Third.
Recent checkered past of Newcastle United, there have been no surprises to match this one. Ardiles sacked and Keegan taking his place. The commentators had said they couldn't afford to pay off Ardiles, even though the team's recent performances left him under enormous pressure, and had followed that the club wouldn't be able to buy in an even bigger name to take his place. This morning, they did both. Steve Sutton starts our reports with the return of Kevin Keegan to St James's Park.
The fans saw Keegan, the player, as the answer to their prayers. Although he only played for Newcastle for 2 seasons, his impact was enormous as he guided them to promotion to Division 1. After a farewell appearance against his old club Liverpool, the Messiah lifted off towards the heavens, turning his back on the game that had made him a household name the world over. Today, the second coming was just as dramatic as the first departure. Keegan was back, once again to help revive a flagging Newcastle United. Out of football for more than 7 years, this was the only job that could have tempted him back.
We've got one really plus point here, and you all know what it is. We've got the best fans in the country. And it's those people who are going to turn this club around, with a little bit of help from all of us. I can honestly say that there's no job in football I've ever wanted. This is the only job I've ever wanted.
Just 3 days ago, Newcastle chairman Sir John Hall said he wanted to end speculation about the future of his then manager Ossie Ardiles by saying his job was as safe as houses.
Results on the field haven't helped, and especially the one last Saturday. And the pressure started to build up, I might say, from the beginning of the week, and it resulted in what's happened today, because the consequences of going into the Third Division are horrendous for the club. And something basically had to be done just to try to ensure our survival.
Ardiles arrived at St James's on April Fool's Day last year. The fans loved him. He pledged to play attractive football. But the league's worst defensive record this season put his team on the brink of Third Division football. Ardiles was told of his dismissal by a club official at 8:30 this morning. Today he spoke of his shock and disappointment, but wished Newcastle and Keegan well. Newcastle's board met at St James's this morning to finalise their move, and no doubt high on the agenda was how to afford to buy out the remaining 2 years of Ardiles' 3-year contract worth over £125,000 a year. When Kevin Keegan came to Newcastle as a player, Newcastle Breweries effectively paid his wages. Now he's back, there will be another tie-up with the brewery, although a source today insisted that this time they'd not be Keegan's paymasters. This afternoon, the new manager was meeting his players and staff and looking forward to getting down to work.
I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to go and see the players. I can't wait for Saturday. And I can't wait for all the things that are going to happen. You know, I want to bring some characters here as well as players. I want to get a new feeling about the whole club. And I think it's very exciting. I mean, we can only really go one way. And if we start off with that attitude, which is a positive one, then everyone will get good vibes. And let's carry it on.
Keegan's first task is to lift flagging morale. He scored on his debut for Newcastle as a player in 1982. A win on Saturday against Bristol City would confirm, to the Newcastle diehards at least, that the Messiah had surely returned.
Well, as we've heard, Ossie Ardiles was told at 8:30 this morning that he was sacked. A club official called at his house to break the news, yet it wasn't until later in the day that he realised a replacement had already been appointed. Chris Keegan was the first reporter to speak to him this morning at his Newcastle home.
Away from the public glare, Ossie Ardiles began the day in stark contrast to the razzmatazz at Newcastle United. As his wife left to see friends, he was listening to a news bulletin. That was how he first heard that Kevin Keegan had been appointed to replace him. Moments later, Mr. Ardiles agreed to talk to Look North in his first interview.
Well, obviously, I am very sad at the moment. It was a bit unexpected, I will say, but obviously I was a bit numb this morning when they told me. But I am recovering now. Obviously very sad, but obviously I have to go.
You said you didn't want to quit at all, despite the performance on pitch. Do you feel bitter at all?
No, I don't. I don't feel bitter at all. To be perfectly honest, everything in Newcastle, from my own point of view, was perfect. Absolutely love the place. Beautiful, beautiful place. The fans, everybody. The players were 100% behind me, no doubt about that. So everything was fine, apart from the result, of course. That is obviously, some people could say, well, it's the most important thing.
Is this the most difficult day in your life?
It's not nice. It's certainly not nice. It hurts. It hurt very much. Like I said, right now I am in a state of a little bit of shock, I will say. It will probably hit me very strongly tomorrow and the next week and so on. But like I said, it's time. Life has to go on.
Later in the day, journalists from around the country gathered outside the house. Mr. Ardiles appeared at the doorway to invite them in for a news conference. The turnout was a measure of the public interest in this saga. Clearly not the happiest man in the world, Mr. Ardiles posed for the photographers, politely obliging all of them. Of the future, he would say only that he's taking a holiday and he wishes the team good luck.
Newcastle's new and former managers are two of the most respected figures in the game. As players, both represented their countries with distinction, and both had great success at club level, at home and abroad. But now their paths are going in opposite directions. Beverly Thompson has these profiles of the two men.
Buenos Aires 1977. Argentina against England, Ardiles against Keegan, and both at the height of their playing careers. The following year, Ardiles would become a World Cup winner. Keegan was about to be transferred from Liverpool to SV Hamburg. One of the stars of the '78 World Cup, Ardiles and teammate Ricardo Villa joined Tottenham. With Ardiles, Spurs won the FA Cup twice, and despite the Falklands War, his popularity with the fans never waned. As a manager with Swindon, Ardiles' brand of football brought praise from the purists and success on the pitch. But promotion celebrations were cut short after illegal payments to players during a previous regime were discovered. He joined Newcastle last April, the board's and the fans' first choice. But the dreams of restoring former glories have fallen flat. Hampered by lack of money, a long injury list and upheavals behind the scenes, Newcastle face humiliating relegation to the third division for the first time in their history. Keegan, the Gallagher hero, was the Newcastle heartbreaker in 1974 when he scored twice in Liverpool's 3-0 FA Cup final victory. After success in Germany and for Southampton, Keegan joined Newcastle in 1982. He was an inspiration on the pitch and loved by the fans. Apart from Keegan, Newcastle had players like Waddle, Beardsley and McDermott. Promotion came in his second season. Keegan retired from playing following an emotional send-off at St James's.
It's very difficult for me at this moment to speak and say what I really feel, but I thank you very much for the last 2 years.
He's now entrusted with one of the least enviable jobs in football. Keegan has no managerial experience, but he's got a Roy of the Rovers reputation, and he's never failed in football. Once again, the commentators are talking about a football renaissance, just as they were when Ardiles took over last April.
Well, Newcastle fans have been giving their reaction. Many believe that Ossie Ardiles just needed more time. But others welcomed his departure, saying Kevin Keegan was the people's choice.
Oh, it's great for the city. Why? The fans love him. Well, the fans love him, you know, it's the people's choice. You know, and I think you need Keegan here to keep them up anyway. You know, get the crews back anyway.
Give a bit more of a boost, eh?
Well, yeah, like you did last time. Be great.
Great stuff, mate.
I've got nothing against Kevin, you know, but I mean, Ardiles, the way he's playing he's got them playing at the moment, they're playing football, okay? It's only a matter of time before the whole team starts to click properly and they start playing the way they should be playing. You know, they're playing better now than they've done for years.
I've always been a admirer of Keegan, like, and I think he could do, well, just a good job, provided he gets a chance to manage, you know. It's, I've sort of a noted club in the past where directors have sort of run things. I mean, I know financially they have to, but the manager should have rein and picking players, and let's hope he makes a good job of it.
He was a good manager, and it was a pity. They've got a good team playing the best football for a long time. It's just they're a bit young. But I think Keegan will probably do good.
The reaction from the fans. So, what does the future hold for the club? Earlier, Steve Sutton spoke to the United chairman, Sir John Hall, and asked him first what had changed since Ardiles had been given a vote of confidence.
A lot has changed in the last few days. Basically, it started with the defeat on Saturday. And probably the most difficult decision I've ever had to make in my business life. But we're looking at the future of the club. And when you're putting a financial package together, you have to retain the confidence of an awful lot of people. And the defeats haven't helped. And we're looking at the survival of the club, and decisions had to be made, which I'm sure Ossie will understand. But I feel sad what's had to be done, because I've got a lot of time for Ossie. The last 5 weeks I've been at the club, I've enjoyed working with him, and we had great plans. But people in business will realise, especially when you're dealing with money, you're not always your own master.
Why Kevin Keegan, though? A man with great charisma as a player, but no managerial experience whatsoever.
It had to be. I would not have accepted any other name than Kevin Keegan in place of Ossie. He's got charisma, he knows the area, and from the point of experience, I relate to his contemporaries at Liverpool, Kenny Dalglish and Graham Souness. They had no experience coming in. I'm sure he can do it for the club, and he's a name which everyone knows and high regard in soccer, and he's the only one that I would have accepted.
But Keegan alone presumably doesn't solve the club's financial problems. It may even add to them, I suppose, because someone of his stature must command a healthy salary, and obviously you've had to clear off Ossie Ardiles' contract as well. Well,
we've got to take all these things on our stride, but the thing is we must remain in the second division for the rescue plan to work. Going down to the third would be disastrous for the club. This caused some of the problems, and putting the figures through the computer, what came out if the club goes down, added to the financial burden, was unthinkable, and we couldn't take it. And one could say basically that Ossie inherited the team, basically, and I inherited the financial situation, and probably in some ways time is running out for both of us.
Sir John Hall, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Kevin Keegan has signed off with a goal.
Keegan has already taken part in one salvage operation at St James's Park. He played a major role in taking Newcastle back into Division 1 in 1984. The Geordie fans knew they'd miss him, but they've had to miss out on a lot of late. Keegan returns to a great challenge. The club are heavily in debt. There's been a long-running power struggle. At times, Newcastle have been more disunited than united. It's hoped he'll have the same charisma as a manager that he had as a player. He's got the confidence.
We will turn this club round. This club will go back where it belongs. It may seem odd days to you all that it's not going the right way, but long term, it will.
Not much had gone right for Ossie Ardiles this season. The FA Cup defeat by 3rd Division Bournemouth was followed by a heavy league defeat by Oxford last Saturday. Under mounting pressure, Chairman Sir John Hall knew something had to be done. With Newcastle staring the 3rd Division firmly in the face, he felt he had no option but to give his manager a vote of confidence. The overture for the sack.
Results on the field haven't helped, and especially the one last Saturday. And the pressure started to build up, I might say, from the beginning of the week, and it resulted in what's happened today, because the consequences of going into the 3rd Division are horrendous for the club. And something basically had to be done just to try to ensure our survival.
The Argentinian had hoped to get the chance to try and keep Newcastle in the second division, but time ran out and he becomes the 5th manager to leave St James's Park in the time Keegan has been away.
Well, I believe I'm very sad at the moment.
He's been out of the game for 8 years, and he leaves a settled life to try and continue his love affair with the Geordie public.
I've had a good life, but I only had a good life because I played football. And you can't ignore that fact. And inside me, like there is inside every player, is a wish to manage, I suppose, to just test yourself out in that other world that you think you understand, but you're never quite sure. And I'm here. I'll let you know next year whether everyone will understand it or not.
Alan, what do you think of the Keegan appointment today?
Well, he seems confident enough, but they're a struggling side. They haven't got any money. He's been out of the game for 8 years. It's a massive challenge for him. He's got a massive job in his hands. I would imagine that he'll have to get somebody in that knows the second division to help him. It's a big challenge for him.
Think he'll do it? Think he'll do well?
I think he will do well. The fans will respond to him up there. They'll love him up there. And I would imagine they'll get a big crowd wherever they play on Saturday.
OK, now some cricket information. And Ian